Hi there. Today we're going to be talking about the process of listing a property. And this was a email I received from Rhonda Ellis, who said she thought a great training topic would be to do the entire listing process. And I think that is a perfect idea for something to train on. So we're going to talk about the concepts of doing a listing. We're also going to be talking about preparing yourself for the listing, preparing the listing for market, and the listing presentation that you should have prepared, and the paperwork involved. So I am going to chat with you a little bit about the process I've just done over the last couple of weeks in preparation for a listing, and then also talk to you about the preparation I've been doing for the last year for a listing. So every single seller has their own motivations as to why they want to sell their home. So when I first hear that a seller is interested in selling their home, I want to get to what their motivation is right away, because that's going to give me a lot of clues about the timing. It's going to give me a lot of clues about the pricing of the home, what their expectations are going to be, and what end result they're hoping for. So there are a couple of different data points I'm hoping to collect about their motivation. Number one is the timing. When are they thinking they'd like to sell their home? I went to a listing presentation 2 weeks ago and I was thrilled because it's an awesome house. I know it's going to sell in a second as soon as it hits the market. But when I got there and started meeting with them and asking the questions I asked, it turns out that he's not retiring until next year. So they were doing the groundwork for a listing for next year, y'all. That's fine. But I had to backpedal on what I'll say is I had to customize my listing presentation to that. I don't want to go in all great. I can get pictures scheduled quickly. We can get it on the market quickly. And then find out they're not retiring until next year. I may come off as a pushy salesperson type. Okay. Or somebody who's just ready to list their house out from under them. So I need to customize my sales approach to the motivations of the seller. So when I went into that listing appointment, I found out that I'm not going to be listing this house at best until another year from now. And so I have no idea what their house is going to be worth next year. No idea. And I told them so. I said, I can tell you what I think your house would be worth if we put it on the market next weekend. But, and this bit me in the rear end on a listing last year, I did this. I gave them the listing presentation. It took a year for them to get it on the market, even though that had not been what they had said they were going to do. And they ended up not hiring me. I saw it go on the market a year later at a higher price. They didn't call me to say, hey, Ashley, I know you told us $450 last year, but we found an agent now a year later who's ready to list it for $500,000. So we're going to go with them. They didn't tell me that. I just saw it go on the market for $500,000. But guess what? I gave them that price a year ago. I would have given them the $500,000 price had they called me and let me know that they were now ready to list. I had touched base with them a few months prior to it going live, but they had said, oh, we're still working on some paperwork and we're still working on some estate stuff, and then we'll get back to you. They didn't get back to me. They listed it with somebody who gave them a more current market value. So now I look like an idiot who thinks the house is worth $450,000. And the new listing agent who was giving them a price recommendation that was more current and current to our market got the listing because she looked like she knew what she was talking about. I did too. I just didn't get to talk to you except a year ago. So that was very frustrating for me. So when I went into this appointment 2 weeks ago, I said to them, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you what I think your house is worth like next weekend. But additionally, when we go to sell it next year, I hope you'll call me and let me do a new version of this comparative market analysis for you, because next year is going to be a totally different number. It might be higher, it might be lower, but I suspect it will be higher than this. And I don't want you to think next year, when you know your house is worth more than this, that I didn't know what I was talking about. I want you to know that I'm giving you a glimpse in time right now. But next year, I want an opportunity to give you my current market value that I think your home is worth. So that is now part of my listing presentation now, because a year ago, I didn't say that. A year ago, I didn't know it was going to take a year for that other property to hit the market. I gave them their moment in time market value, but they ended up not circling back with me after I reached out to them again. That was tough, y'all. It went on the market for $505 and sold in like 2 weeks. Oh, well. So I still learn things too. So motivation is going to be very, very important for you to establish. When do they want their house to go on the market? How quickly do they want their house to sell? Why are they selling the house? I just got an email last night that an investor client is going to put their house on the market. It's a rental house. It's gorgeous though. They honestly over improved it for a rental market. They've had it rented, but now they're going to put it on the market and just see if it goes. But because of that, they're going to overprice it. So it's important for me to know that they only want to do a 10-week listing at this over market price. Otherwise, they'll pull it off the market and they'll rent it out again. They're just testing the market. If somebody's willing to pay them stupid money for that house right now, they're willing to take stupid money for that house right now. So I came in and I told them I thought it was worth X dollars. They emailed me last night and said, hey, Ash, but I told them, I said, I understand. This is what I think. This is what the comps are saying. I'm not saying this is market value. I'm telling you, this is what the comparatives are saying. I think market value is higher than that. I think we have even fewer houses on the market now. And so I think your market value is going to be much higher than this comparative market analysis I'm providing you with solds from the past 12 months. I was very clear with them that the price showing up on the comparative market analysis is not what I think their home is worth right now. I think their house is worth more than that. And because of that, they are going to hire me to list the house for sale. Had I not had that explanation to them, they might have thought I didn't know what their house was worth. And again, this goes to understanding the difference between appraised value, market value, and listing prices. Listing prices may be what the seller really wants, but it may also be them just testing the market to see what they can get. It may be them pricing it at a very affordable price, hoping to create some sort of bidding war. You don't know what the thoughts were with the seller when you are the buyer's agent. Now with me and my seller and this investment property that we're getting ready to list, I know I have 10 weeks to sell this house. I also know that we're going to be pricing it about 40 grand above what the comparatives say, because we're just hoping it'll sell. If it doesn't, they'll stick a renter back in it. I'm willing to take a listing like that because it's worth it to me to continue to have this relationship with my investor, continue to be a resource for my investor. But I am making sure their expectations are in place, that we are overpricing this home for the market in an effort to see if we can get someone to take the bait. And if we can, terrific. But I'm having very open communication with my investor client because I know they're going to judge me by this experience. I want them to know I am on board with what we're doing. And if this listing expires and doesn't sell at that price, it's not that I didn't try hard enough. It's not that I didn't know what I was doing. It's that we are outpricing the market to see if there's someone with so much pent-up demand, they're willing to come and buy this house at this price. Does that make sense? I have to keep the dialogue correct. I have to make sure they understand we are a team. We're making this decision together to price it where we're pricing it. It's not that I thought it was worth so much less. That's what the comparatives say. And it's not that I'm overpricing it for the market by myself. We're all agreeing to see what it test the market and see what it'll bear. We're also obviously going to be very selective about what buyers offer we accept. We're certainly not going to accept an offer where the buyer isn't obligated to cover some sort of appraisal gap, because we understand that there aren't going to be comparatives to support that sale price. All of that is to say, call me with questions about that. Okay. Okay. So let's go to my house that I've been trying to get on the market for a year. These are some clients who moved. They have a house that is going to go on the market. We've been slowly doing some renovations on the house to get it ready for market, things that I thought would help it sell for a higher price. And honestly, my litmus test for what I want the seller to do is, will the buyer have to immediately do it? Will they have to do it before they can move in? And if they are going to have to, then I'm going to ask my seller to do it. So if my seller has patched some holes on the wall and not painted the room, the new buyer is going to have to paint that room. So I'm going to ask my seller to paint the room. Not because I think it'll sell for more money, but I think it'll be one less area in which the buyer will tell themselves they can now negotiate. It'll be one less area that will be a stumbling block if a duplicate of this home comes on the market down the street. I don't want them picking the duplicate. I want them picking mine. So anything that the buyer is going to have to do immediately upon closing, I'm going to ask my seller to do it instead. Now, obviously, there can be some extenuating circumstances, but I always take the opportunity to go to the house and take a tour of the home. And let me give you the rhythm of my listing presentations. I will have already done some research on the house prior to showing up, but I'm not going to come with a comparative market analysis in hand, because I don't know what they've done to the inside of the house. I don't know that they haven't replaced all the countertops with granite countertops, or, you know, they have remodeled both bathrooms and they look gorgeous now. Or the flip side of that, they've done absolutely nothing to the home since they purchased the home 20 years ago. I don't know. Now, sometimes I can do a more educated guess as to what to expect because they bought it 2 years ago and I can see all the photos from the previous listing. But again, I don't know what they've done or not done. So I'm not going to come in with a comparative market analysis in hand, because I'm most likely, and oftentimes I'm not right, because I don't know what they've done to the house or not done to the house. And I don't want to then have to have a lot of caveats to my comparative market analysis. Instead, I'm going to do a comparative market analysis for my own information, because almost always they want to know what I think the home is worth. Almost always. Now, it boggles the mind. I've been doing this a long time, and it boggles the mind that people think I can walk into their home, wander around, not look up comparatives, and just give them a number. Okay. I don't know why the general public thinks that we're some sort of, you know, algorithm in our head where we have the data downloaded in there. We don't. And I just tell them, I say, you know what? I'm not sure yet. I've got a price range in mind, but I want to go back. I want to crunch some numbers. I want to look and see what has sold in the area most similar to your home, because quite frankly, your home is a little nicer than I was expecting. You guys have really made some nice upgrades here that I was not expecting. So I'd like to go back and look at the past sales a little harder and try to determine where you might fall in a listing price or a marketing price after reflecting on the past sales. I have never had somebody say, you can't give me a number right now, I'm not hiring you. It's just never happened. You know, they are fine with me going back to quote unquote crunch some numbers. And I do. I go back to that comparative market analysis I've already done, and I look at it and I look at the comps and I decide if there's some I need to throw out, some I need to include. And I just try to fine tune the thought process I'd already started before I went to see the house, because now I have more information. Now I know that they have got to sell it in 30 days because they're getting transferred for work. Now I know they don't have to sell it They'd like to sell it, but only if they can get maximum dollars for it. All of those are going to have to, all of those details are going to have to go into what price I recommend to them. Moving it in 30 days or moving it for maximum dollars are not always the same thing. Now, in this market, they're almost the same thing. But in markets not like this one, I have to talk to them about, are we pricing this to sell in 30 days? Or are we pricing this to sell in 6 months and hoping to find the right buyer who's willing to pay our top dollar amount? In this market, again, they're kind of the same thing, but I want to teach you guys for all markets, not just this one market we're in. Also, selling it in 30 days may be too fast for them. And if they say, oh no, I mean, we're not moving for 3 months. We haven't even bought a house in Ohio where we're moving to. It's probably not time to list it yet, because I'm the expert on the market. I am there to tell them that their house is going to sell too quickly. I don't want to stigmatize their property by overpricing it, hoping it'll take 3 months to sell, because then you can end up selling for even less because you have got so many days on the market. Because that might be a tip your seller might say. Your seller might say, well, let's just price it too high, and then we'll have a little more time to try to find a house in Ohio. I'm not going to let them do that, because a house on the market right now with 60 days on the market not having sold, people are going to want to know why. And when you can't put your finger on why, they're not going to buy your house. So I'm not going to let them stigmatize the property. Instead, I'm going to say, you know what? I think we need to pump the brakes for 30 days. Let's look and see. And we're going to look at our price again in 30 days, see what the market's doing again. And let's put it on the market in 30 days or 45 days from now, rather than right now. They're looking to me for a listing strategy. And it's my job to come up with a customized marketing plan and a customized strategy for listing their home to net them what they're looking for. That may just be money. It may be money and timing. It may be money and timing and relieving them from some sort of legal issue they're having. Maybe they're behind on their mortgage. Maybe they're becoming fearful that they might become foreclosed on. In that case, I'm going to have to price it right to move quickly and get it on the market quickly. I may also have to have them reach out to their mortgage company to find out if they're allowed to sell their house right now. If they're upside down on their house, they may not be able to sell it right now. Now, no better time than now. Almost no one would be upside down on their house right now because the market values are through the roof. But what I'm doing when I go into that listing presentation to meet them for the first time in their home is I'm surveying the property to find out what repairs I think will be needed. I'm trying to get to what end result are they looking for? What are they trying to get? Are they trying to unload the property because they can't make the mortgage payments? Are they maybe one person's moved out and now one person's trying to manage that mortgage payment alone? Are they trying to just take advantage of the market? And if they're just trying to take advantage of the market and make an extra 20 grand right now, that's fine. But where are they going? Because if I can't get them in a home and they need a home, that's a conversation we need to have. Do they have the ability to move somewhere or live with someone until I can find them a home? These are questions that have to come up during the listing presentation. And then I need to give them a list of things I want them to get done prior to listing the home. Right now, that list is very, very short. And the way I tell it to them is I've got Ashley's wish list and I've got Ashley's reality list, okay? And I do joke with them and say, listen, you've only known nice Ashley. Now I'm going to take a tour of your house. And I'm going to be mean Ashley, because I've got to point out the things I think need to be done. But I promise you, you're going to like me at the end when your house sells and it sells for the money you want. So if you can listen to me and if you can stand to paint for a while, I promise you that's going to be the best approach for the market right now. So if you can do those things, I would really appreciate it if you could. Very rarely do I have a seller who says, nah, I'm not going to do anything. It's as is. I want to sell it as is. And if they tell me they want to sell it as is, In any other market, my advice is this. I hear that you don't want to make repairs or aren't able to make repairs, and I hear that you'd like to sell the house as is. May I make a recommendation that we not sell it as is? And here's why. If we sell it as is, we are really restricting the buyers who are able to purchase this home to cash buyers and conventional loans only. There are a lot of buyers who would like to take advantage of the resources that an FHA, USDA, VHDA, VA loan bring to the table to them. I'm afraid we're going to end up not being able to accept offers from folks who would like to use those loan products because of selling it as is. Could you tell me what your concerns are as to why you want to sell it as is? And then I'm going to listen to that. If the reason why they want to sell it as is because their mother is in a nursing home and she has no money to make these repairs, and there are some things that need to be done, I'm going to take a critical eye to the house and say, well, I see that your concern is that you just don't want to make repairs. But I'm looking around and you have all replacement windows in the house. I don't see any peeling, chipping paint. There are handrails to all of the basement stairs. I'm not seeing anything that I think is going to come up as an appraisal required repair with these government-backed loans. However, if it does, let me assure you that our contract has already dealt with that. Our standard language in our purchase agreement states that if the appraiser on any of these government-backed loans asks for a repair, the seller can make that repair, but the seller is not obligated to make that repair. And instead, the seller agrees in the standard language that they will allow the buyer to have the repair made so they can fulfill the obligations to their loan and the contingencies on that loan. So seller, it actually wouldn't be burdened onto you to make an appraisal required repair. Our contract says you just can't bar the buyer from doing it. So worst case scenario, the buyer is going to improve your property for you. They're going to add a handrail or take care of the peeling, chipping paint. And our contract says that has to be done by a licensed contractor. So if the buyer's willing to pay for that appraisal repair in order to use this in order to use this government-backed loan, would you have any, would that deter you? And oftentimes they'll say, oh, well, no, that'd be okay. I just don't want to make any repairs. So I've got to find out why it is they want to sell as is. Now, if they tell me that, and I see a lot of red flags, like peeling, chipping paint everywhere, maybe the floor is falling through in one of the rooms, then that is probably going to be a home where I'm already saying this is probably not going to be accessible for a buyer who's wanting to use a government-backed loan. And if you have questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to run through what the appraisers are looking for and what is going to be a required repair when a government-backed loan appraiser goes out to do an FHA appraisal. Okay. And then what I would recommend is, okay, let's just go ahead and not sell the home as is, seller, but instead let's put $1 in that repair remediation limit. The buyer can have all the inspections they want to have. That's fine. We're going to be obligated to $1 of repairs. So you have the option then, seller, when they send us a list of repairs, to say, I'll fix them, or no thanks, but I'll credit you $1. Now, if you credit them the $1, the buyer is going to be able to say, okay, I'll either accept the $1 in the house and as is condition, or I'm going to go ahead and terminate and go look for another home because the buyer doesn't want to be burdened with those repairs. That is how you can sell the home with a very low $1 repair obligation to the seller, but the buyer gets to have their inspections and the buyer gets to have a termination right if things come up that are going to be deal breakers for them. You don't have to remember all of this right this second. You can just call me and say, this is the situation, what would you do? And I'll walk you through it, okay? My point here is I want all of this to sound familiar to you later when it comes up, okay? All right, so now we've gone over what my conversation is going to be during that listing presentation, how I want them to prep the home, items I would want them to do, anything that's going to come up as an appraisal required repair, I'm probably going to ask them to do. That can be as simple as a handrail down the stairs. That can be as simple as just taking care of the peeling, chipping paint on the exterior of the home. And please keep in mind that you have to dispose of the peeling, chipping paint properly. You can't just take a scraper out there and fill the whole yard with paint chips. Okay, that's not going to fly. So you're going to have to make sure you're just collecting them, and your seller can do all of this themselves prior to going on the market. And one tip I try to give my sellers is anything that's going to come up in an inspection later, go ahead and do now. You can have a handyman do it now. You can do it yourself now. You, seller, can take care of the peeling, chipping paint around the windows now. Whereas once we're under contract, then it's going to be a contractor has to do that work. Okay. So this is an opportunity to do it on the cheap now and take care of it yourself now, rather than later when we're under contract and it's obligated to be done by a contractor. Now, Jennifer has a question. She says, remediation limit is how much the seller is willing to pay for repairs and also how much they are willing to compensate the buyer if they choose to make repairs, correct? Yes. That is the seller's total obligation to their obligations in the contract concerning title clouds, concerning material adverse facts about the property. That is the seller's total obligation. So by setting it at a very low limit, you still keep the mechanism in place that allows the buyer to ask for repairs, but doesn't require the seller to have an obligation more than $1, but also preserves a termination right for the buyer. Truly buying it as is means doesn't matter what you discover during those inspections, you're closing anyway. So that is also a way you can write the contract. And you would think to yourself, well, why wouldn't I want my seller just to do a true as is contract? Inspections can be for the buyer's information only, because I'm here to tell you that buyer says they are going to do that. But then when they've had those inspections, there's going to be pushback. They're going to come back to you and say, oh, but we didn't know XYZ, but we didn't know the roof was 28 years old, but we didn't know the HVAC system didn't cool very well. And then you're going to have a problem. So in my opinion, a cleaner contract, even though it gives a termination right to the buyer, a cleaner contract in my mind would be not having that ambiguity about what's going to happen when these inspections for information only lead the buyer to say, hold on a minute. I understand that it was supposed to be for my information only, but we didn't know XYZ. And now you have no mechanism to even have that conversation. So by keeping the remediation limit in place and making it $1 or $5 or $250, it provides the buyer a termination right. If the seller decides that they only want to issue a credit of the $1, it gives the buyer an out, but it also keeps the seller saying, listen, the expectation is I'm not doing anything on this house. You can have your inspections and you can have a termination right if you don't like what you see, but only if there are material defects discovered in excess of $1. Now, of course there will be. Who can't find $1 of material defects in a property? So really what you're doing is you're just keeping intact that mechanism by which we allow the buyer and the seller to decide if they're still going to move forward with the contract. This is not the only way to write a contract, and it obviously is not even pro-seller because it's alleviating the repair expense for the seller, but it's still letting the buyer out. So if you were really pro-seller in this market right now, you would do a true as is contract and you would strike that entire clause. But I'm going to tell you that doesn't remove the ambiguity later when the buyer is pitching a fit because they didn't know something about the property. They bought it 4 hours on the market, maybe never even saw it. And now the inspection report has come back with material defects because of course these are used homes, and the buyer is pitching a fit because they don't have a termination right. You're getting into some muddy waters there. And if you have a buyer who stomps their feet and isn't going to go to closing, I would argue that's not in the seller's best interest either. Now we have to get attorneys involved and try to determine how to force the buyer to the closing table. So there is no right way to do this market right now. I'm just giving you some various ways to do it, and you pick what's going to be best for your seller. And it's all going to come down to having the conversation with your seller about expectations and what they can expect. Okay, so let's talk about the rest of the listing presentation, what rhythm I've fallen into doing listing presentations that I find most effective. So I go in and I set my pad of paper and my pen. I never actually ever write anything in it, but I bring it with me because it's an excuse to set it down at the kitchen table or on the coffee table. And I set it down when I arrive. And then I say, can I get a tour of the property? And they give me a tour. And I say, hey, will you take a couple of notes about things I'd like for you to do prior to listing it? And they walk through the house with me and they take some notes. Okay. And then I now have an excuse to transition to the coffee table or transition to the kitchen table to have a conversation about what my marketing strategy will be, what my, and what I am bringing with me is I'm bringing my listing presentation. I'm not bringing my comparative market analysis with me, but I am bringing my listing presentation. And I'm going to share my screen for a quick minute. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. And what my listing presentation is it is simply a resume about me, some testimonials about me, some past what I call signature sales, okay, from the previous year. It's also going to give them what my marketing plan is going to be. I have found that when I want to tell them I'm going to charge, and this is just a Wainwright charge, whatever Wainwright is charging for listings, when I tell them what that fee is going to be, what that brokerage is going to be, I want that to be very clear to them that that is a very reasonable brokerage to be asking for, because I have illustrated to them all the very professional, best business practice ways I'm going to list their home for sale. I am going to give their property the very best chance to sell at top dollar quickly for them. So part of this is page 1 is all about me. And what I'm doing here is I am leaning hard on our firm resume. So I am talking about how many agents we have. I'm talking about how many MLS areas our firm belongs to. So instead of it saying member of Roanoke Valley Association of Realtors, New River Valley Association of Realtors, Lynchburg Association of Realtors, Martinsville Henry County Association of Realtors, instead of saying that, it's going to say the firm belongs to, and you're going to list all of those associations. That's how you, as a new agent, can beef up your resume by leaning on the firm resume. How many sales has the firm had? How many listings has the firm had? That may not be something you want to put on a resume right now because it looks terribly small, but it's just because we're still doing our fair market share, but there are just a smaller pool of listings now. Second page is my cornerstones of successfully marketed homes. And this is talking about all the marketing resources I'm going to use when I am marketing their home. This is my 30-day marketing plan. Now, 30 days seems like a long time now. In a market that is not this market, a 30-day marketing plan sounds very reasonable. Over the first 30 days of the listing, these are the things I'm going to do for you. Now, I might want to tweak this for this market and make this a 10-day marketing plan, just so it seems like I am experienced in what this market is doing. Nothing is staying on the market for 30 days right now. Next is my recommendations page. And so I have got some fresh recommendations. These come right off of my Zillow or my Realtor.com profile. And you have got to be asking people for recommendations. If you have never sold a home, but you are working with a buyer, ask for a recommendation. They're going to give you a recommendation about how quick your communication is, how responsive you are, how informative you've been about the current market. And if you need to give them a couple of talking points, you can. Can you say, hey, would you just give me a recommendation on realtor.com or on Zillow or my Facebook business page about what your experience has been with me so far? You know, am I quick to get back with you? Am I willing to show you houses in the evening, on the weekends, or whenever it's available? Have I accommodated your schedule? Would you just give me a little shout out, pretty please? I'm trying to build up my business, and it would go so far in helping me if you wouldn't mind just taking 5 minutes to write a recommendation for me. There is no rule that you can't have a recommendation unless it's from someone who has bought or sold with you. It can be a buyer who is currently working with you. And that's how you're going to be able to fill out this listing presentation for yourself. Next page is going to be my signature sales. If you have not had sales yet, you just don't have this page. The seller doesn't know this page exists, right? They have no idea that the signature sales page is a part of the listing presentation. So just don't have it. Leave it off. That is my entire listing presentation. It is not 20 pages. It doesn't need to be 20 pages. It needs to say, who am I? What is my action plan for getting their house sold? And what experience or testimonials do I have to show them that I am the person for the job? That's all it needs to accomplish. Okay. It needs to back up what I am telling them. I know what I'm doing. Here's why I know what I'm doing. And page 1 illustrates that I have the resources and the broker support to be successful for them. And you'll see things that could easily be incorporated into a listing presentation, like lived in the Roanoke Valley her entire life, resulting in an expansive network of buyers and investors. That is a very simple thing to put on a resume that has nothing to do with past sales. If you have not lived in the Roanoke Valley your entire life, certainly you can say resident of Smith Mountain Lake, full-time resident of Smith Mountain Lake for 10 plus years, resulting in an expansive network of buyers. You could also play up if you've got great connections with vendors in the area, contractors, plumbers, electricians, all of that. That's something that can go in here. It really is, what is a resource to this seller and what is going to convince this seller that you are the person for the job? So this is my listing presentation. It is available over on the shared Google Drive. If you need a link to that, we certainly can send you one. And then you can download it, put it in Google Drive yourself, and tweak it, customize it, put your photo on it, whatever you want to do, okay? I am happy for you to rip this off and make it your own. I already saw some editing I need to do on mine. Every time I go on this thing, I see, oh, that's not right. I need to move a comma. All right, it's going to stop sharing my screen. Now, that is the listing presentation that I'm taking with me. I'm leaving that for them, okay? And then I'm saying to them, I'm going to go back and I'm going to crunch the numbers. I'm going to produce a comparative market analysis for you. That is going to be a report showing you what homes in your area most similar to your home have sold for in the last 12 months. May we go ahead and set up an appointment for me to bring that back, because it's got a lot of data on it about how many days on the market and how much percentage of the listing price it sold for. And I'd love to go over those numbers with you and help translate it for you and interpret it so that we can come up with a listing price that's going to be most appropriate. Go ahead and try to set that follow-up appointment. They may say, no, can you just email it to me? Certainly I do that. That's fine. But I'm going to get them on the phone and go over it with them. And then just so that you understand, there has to be a point during that listing presentation when you're in their home that you ask for the business. This is the hardest part of trying to get a listing. Very rarely do I not get the listing. If I've gone in with my listing presentation, I've taken a walk around their home and complimented things they've done to the home. I have sat back down with them at that kitchen table or that coffee table, and I've gone over my listing presentation with them. When I have completed the listing presentation with them, and I tell them what my brokerage charges, and that I'm going to be sharing that with a buyer's agent 50-50, that I'm going to give half of that away to a buyer's agent. I've gone ahead and told them that. I'm going to make an excuse to go away for a minute. I'm going to say, you know what? I just missed a couple of things in the basement. Do you mind if I just bop right down there for a quick second and take a picture or two and come back up? And one of them might stand up to try to go with me. I'll say, no, you sit down, you stay there. I'll be right back up. I'm going away deliberately. No two people are going to just have read each other's mind that I'm the person for the job and they're not going to hire me without discussing it first. So I'm bopping out to take a quick phone call, to return a text message. And I may say that, hey, I'm so sorry. I promised this lender I would text them before 10 a.m. Do you mind if I step outside real quick? I just want to fire off a quick text message to this lender on a transaction I have going on, whatever. And then I'll come right back in. I'm stepping away for 2 to 3 minutes, no longer than 5 minutes, because I want to give them the opportunity to say, I don't know, what do you think? Do you like her? Yeah, I like her. Okay. So are we really listing our house? Okay, I guess we are. When I come back in that room, they are seated, I am standing, and I'm going to ask for the business. And that is the moment I'm going to ask for the business, because they know I'm coming back. They've been wondering when I'm going to ask for the business. And for me, I have to know exactly when I'm going to do it. Otherwise, I'm anxious the entire time trying to figure out where to fit it into the conversation. I don't want to try to constantly be evaluating whether it's the time or not. I want to know exactly when I'm going to ask for the business. So I'm going to walk back into that room. And I'm going to say, all right, guys, you ready to list your house with me? And then I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let them tell me what they think, because I've already sold myself. That time is done. If they say, I don't know, I'll say, no problem at all. How about I get back with you with the comparative market analysis, and we're going to look at those numbers and decide if there's a listing price that appeals to you. If they say, yeah, sure, I'm going to say, great, let's get that comparative market analysis looked over tonight, and then let's talk about when we're going to put it on the market. I'm going to come back in that room and I'm going to say, all right, y'all, am I the woman for the job? All right, guys, are we listing our house? And I'm going to shut up. Shutting up is hard for me. I have to make myself do it, but it is important to do it. You have to let them speak. You have to hear why they are or are not ready to hire you. Okay. But I'm going to have laid out a foolproof plan for selling their home. I'm going to have told them what I charge, and then I'm going to ask them for the business. Does that make sense? Okay. Paperwork, we're going to do a different day. Let's just say you got to do the paperwork, and we will go over the listing documents and the listing document package on a different training class. I want to open it up now for any questions you guys may have, or any approaches y'all use that you might like to share. This is 100% what I do. This does not have to be what you do. I'm just trying to sort of lift the veil a little and let you see what that experience looks like and what I have found to be effective. Because I'm going to tell you, not every strategy I've used has been successful. Not every time I walked in with a comparative market analysis was I not embarrassed and trying to hide it because it was going to insult them, because I had no idea they'd completely refinished their entire basement. So it's hard to come back from, oh, here's this glossy, pretty, beautiful comparative market analysis where I said your house is worth $189,000. But disregard that. I didn't know you'd finished your basement. So really now I think your house is worth $250. They're going to look at the 189 after I leave. I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Let's open it up. See if anybody's got any questions or tips or tricks. I am happy to hear from anybody. What you got?
Ashley, I have a question.
Ma'am. Yes, Rhonda.
How, I don't know how it is in Roanoke, but I know here at the lake, it is saturated with realtors who've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. How do I compete at a listing appointment against their long-term experience?
One thing I'll tell you is a lot of those agents who've been doing it a long time have a fully robust marketing plan. They come in with a lot of materials to support that. A lot don't, Rhonda. They are walking in the door on reputation only.
Okay.
You may stumble upon a seller who loves that you took the time to customize a marketing plan for them. Take that listing presentation, get a photo from a previous, go take a photo of the house before you go. Incorporate a page about their home. Show them that you've customized your listing presentation to their own home. Drive by, take a picture of the front of the house, have an additional page in your listing presentation that highlights some of the features of the home. And say, put on there features I'm excited to showcase, and list those items that you're excited. They want to see that you are excited about their home.
Yeah.
And that you're going to have that enthusiasm as a listing agent. I'm not going to be able to tell you that you can compete with the experience of another agent. You're not going to be able to. All you can do is shine a light on what your unique benefits are of them listing with you.
Okay.
And you may end up stumbling upon a seller who is super detail oriented and did not like that other agent came in with absolutely no materials. Just, hey, I'm so-and-so. I sell a lot of lake houses. You should list with me. They may not like that. They may want to see on paper what you're going to be doing for them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Anybody else have a question? Anything you want to add?
I have a question, Ashley.
Please.
It's Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. So when you're a right to represent buyer, okay, when you're doing a listing, you don't have a right to represent seller, correct? It's just the listing presentation itself is the agreement. I mean, the listing contract is the agreement.
Correct. There's no such form as exclusive. Well, there is what is the form called? Why has that completely fallen out of my head? Isn't it the exclusive right to represent seller? Is the listing agreement? Yes, it's called exclusive right to represent seller, but we colloquially call it the listing agreement.
Okay,
and that is,
when would you do that? When they're actually decided they want to list it, and then you fill out the paperwork, and then you have so much time to get it on the market, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
There are 2 dates on that listing form, on the exclusive right to represent seller form. The top date is the date you're creating the form. The bottom of page 1 has what's called the listing period. That is the time in which it's going to be actively marketed. And those dates can be different. One time I had to go to a mediator for a divorcing couple, and the mediator got them to agree to the terms to list their house. We executed that listing agreement like December 1st, 2016, but the listing period was like 9 months later, because the mediator was like, they're in the mood to sign this thing. I'm going to make them sign it now. It's not going to go live for another 9 months, but while they're in agreement to sign it and to use you and to the terms of the listing, let's go ahead and execute it. So those dates can be quite far apart. The date you create the listing agreement and have them sign it can be months away from the listing period. Did that answer your question?
Yes, because just when you're representing a buyer, you feel so much pressure to get them to commit to you.
Yes.
You want them to sign that right to represent as soon as you possibly can, so they don't fall in love with somebody else.
Correct.
But it's not the same thing when you're actually listing the home.
Well,
right?
It can be the same thing, because I don't want them to fall in love with another listing agent either. So even if their home is not ready to be sold for another 3 months, I'm either going to do one heck of a job staying in touch with them and being the point person, or I'm going to ask them to go ahead and execute listing paperwork with me, even though the listing period may not begin for another couple of months. Just like I want to lock down the relationship with my buyer, I do also want to lock down my relationship with the seller. I do. That's the
Mhm.
only protection we have as real estate agents.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Anybody else have a question or something to add?
Hey, Ashley, it's Dow.
Hi, Dow.
Hey, I just wanted to mention I did a VA loan. I was a buyer's agent, and that is a very strict loan as it relates to the appraisal and also fixing items on the list. So just beware if you're on the other end. It's great for the buyer, but the seller pretty much has to fix everything that falls within those guidelines. So,
Well, our contract Dow says that the seller doesn't have to, but they have to let the buyer do it. So if there are appraisal required repairs, you do write those up as a buyer's agent and submit them to the listing agent to say, hey, these are the appraisal required repairs. But the seller is under no obligation to actually fix those. They just can't ban the buyer from doing it themselves. So if the VA appraiser comes back and says, hey, the peeling chipping paint around the exterior windows needs to be fixed, and there needs to be a handrail to the basement stairs, and there's a trip hazard between the sunroom and the living room, the buyer's agent's going to write all those up, submit them to the listing agent, and the listing agent may say, no, thank you. The seller is not going to make those repairs, but the buyer at the buyer's expense can. Now, they would have to hire someone to do it unless both the seller and the buyer agree to let the buyer do it themselves. So you could have an amendment saying the seller and the buyer agree to allow the buyer to correct the peeling, chipping paint themselves, because, you know, that's not a contractor grade repair. But they would have to be in agreement to that. And the seller may say, no, thank you. I don't want that buyer painting this house. What if the loan doesn't go through? They need to hire a painter to do that. Well, the buyer can do that. It does mean more money out of pocket for the buyer to address those repairs, but it would mean being able to satisfy that appraisal contingency for their loan and be able to continue on with a VA loan product. Does that answer your question, Dow, and address your concern about that? Because that is an excellent point you brought up.
well, and let me maybe learn more from this, because now in my situation, how it rolled out, my buyer had many requests on the list, let's say 10. But would it have just been the mortgage, the type of loan that did require, because we got down the track and we were very close to closing. They had been approved very early on, but I am sure it was a stipulation of the bank, because they jumped right on and they were happy. They just rolled through and fixed everything. So let's say originally
the seller did.
I'm sorry.
The seller
The
jumped
seller
on
did.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they can.
and
The seller
Okay.
absolutely can address those repairs. They don't have to. When I am a listing agent, I tell them, yeah, let's do it. Let's just do it and let these buyers move onward to closing.
But
the seller
again,
have
am I confused that it was that the loan would only be approved? I mean, the loan would only be pushed through from the VA requirement if they did not do it. That's where the disconnect in my head was, because that's kind of how it rolled out in this particular loan.
I would
And they
say-
just jumped
I would
right
say-
on.
Dow, you got lucky to have a seller who opted to address those items. The seller doesn't
Okay.
have to. The seller can, at their expense, the seller can address those repairs. And if they have a listing agent like me, I'm going to tell them to. I'm going to say, look,
Okay.
buyers using a VA loan, trying to use their veterans eligibility. They're trying to close on this property without a lot of cash to close. That's why they're using a VA loan. It's typically a 100% financing loan. They don't obviously have a lot of cash to put towards a repair. Let's just go ahead and do it. Let me get you some estimates, seller, and let's just knock this out. Let's get it to close on time. However, the standard language in our purchase agreement is clear in the second paragraph of the financing terms that, excuse me, in that clause 13, the second paragraph of clause 13 on our purchase agreement says, if there are appraisal required repairs, lender required repairs, the seller can make those repairs at the seller's expense, but they don't have to, but they have to let the buyer do it. So in your case, Dow, it
Wow.
sounds like you had a nice seller who said, sure, we'll do that. But if they had said no,
Yeah.
your buyer could have done it to be able to stay in the loan product.
All right, and that's such a learning curve because my lender handled all of that. He went directly with me in the loop and sent an email and said, these are the items we need repaired, and in order to close out this loan. I mean, and I would love to just go back and maybe forward that email to you, but bottom line, he reached out to her. She jumped on with the sellers and they got it fixed, and it was like this deadline. But anyway, so in my head, I thought they had to do it because
So Dow, it is
the
very,
mortgage I did it.
Dow, it is very, very common that when we're learning something new, the way it went the first time for us is how we think it has to be done, right? Because
Yes,
that's how it works for you. It's great that it worked that way for you, but it doesn't have to go that way. But
I
the
got it.
important piece to remember is the seller cannot stand in the way of that VA loan, the seller or FHA loan. If the appraiser is requiring repairs, the seller does not have to do the repairs, but they cannot stand in the way of the buyer having those repairs done so that they can satisfy the appraisal requirement for their loan. So the seller cannot block those appraisal required repairs. Does that make sense?
I gotcha. Wow. Well, I just am very grateful you were showing me grace, and that all rolled out perfect for me.
You got
So
lucky
I
duck.
definitely learned. Thank you
You're
for
very
taking
welcome,
time to
Dow.
walk through that.
And quite frankly, you probably had an experienced listing agent on the other side who said, listen, why are we going to make the buyer do those couple of repairs? Let's just do them. So
Yes, that's true. 30 years in the business, and she was great. I told her I was relatively new, and she kind of even shepherded me. So that was a blessing.
don't we all hope to be that agent one day?
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Good
I have to
deal.
hold my
Thank
tongue
you so
sometimes.
much.
I want to help too much to the buyer's agent, the inexperienced buyer's agent on the other side, or the inexperienced listing
Yeah.
agent on the other side. And I have to remind myself, I'm not their broker. It's not my job to train them. I'm gonna help, but I'm not the broker. So
I worked for Red Cross for 9 years, and I learned how to ask for help. So I'll jump in and take it anywhere I can.
Me too. Well, Dow, that was an excellent talking point. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Miki is asking, is there verbiage that can be written into the contract that the seller may make appraisal required repairs, but isn't obligated to either? Yes, that is already in our standard language. The second paragraph of clause 13 on our contract states that the seller can make them, but isn't obligated to make them. But if the seller chooses not to make them, they have to let the buyer make them at the buyer's expense. That is already in our contract. And that is an effort to tell the seller, no, you have no right to block the appraisal required repairs, which would keep the buyer from getting their loan completed. Yes, Miki.
Okay, so question, to extend a little further on that,
Sure.
is that something that you can put in the listing, so that,
I see the listing.
yes,
I typically, you're saying put it in the listing that the seller will take care of appraisal required repairs?
yeah, well, possibly, because I know sometimes they can be, there can be a lot.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know that I would ever recommend that, because then you're, first off, the listing agreement is between Wainwright and Company and the seller. I don't know that vehicle, that contract can obligate them to anything regarding terms on a contract between the seller and a buyer. That's a totally separate contract. So maybe, I don't know that I would ever recommend that to my seller, because like you said, you have no idea what's going to come up. And quite frankly, the appraisal required repairs do change. You know, what if a new requirement is handed down and now there's a very expensive repair and your seller is obligated themselves to pay for it? I think it works well the way it's already written. I probably would not mess with that.
Okay, one other question. I
Yes.
know that you and I had actually talked about this on a listing that I may have coming up, and he really doesn't want to, he wants to sell the property as is, but he knows that it will probably sell with a government loan, honestly. And so you and I talked about it, and I think I scratched some notes down that said in the private remarks, I can put something like property sold as is, seller to consider making appraisal required repairs.
Yes.
Is that okay?
I think that's fine, because what you're saying is the seller does not want to make repairs, but understands they may be a requirement of the loan
Okay,
and
okay,
may consider making them. Yes, I think that's perfectly fine,
okay,
because you're showing that there would be a willingness to consider those.
okay. So that's fine to put
That's
that in the
fine.
listing under private remarks.
Yes, correct. And
Okay,
Jennifer has asked a sort of a piggyback question on this. She has asked, loan required repairs are also subject to remediation amount, correct? I don't think so. I think they are above and beyond the remediation limit. And I'm almost positive of that. I have not read that clause 13, the second paragraph in clause 13 in a couple of weeks, but I'm almost positive that is above and beyond clause 17's repair remediation limit. So that is independent of the repair remediation limit. But also, because the seller has the right to say, no thanks, I'm not going to do them, it doesn't obligate the seller further than clause 17's repair remediation limit for their total obligations, because the seller always has the right to decline making the appraisal required repairs. So I guess what I'm trying to get around to say is, your seller's not going to have additional obligations, even though appraisal required repairs are above and beyond clause 17's repair remediation limit, because they always have the option to say no thank you. Good question. Good golly, y'all have some good questions today. If I could get half of y'all's energy injected into the 9 a.m. class, that would be awesome.